If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. You are listening to the Maura Murray series. This is episode 49, Bill Rausch 5. Examining even more strangeness with Bill Rausch. His supposed ongoing social media commentating without really saying anything at all. A master of non-answers. Bill Rausch himself has taken a keen interest in some of the Mindshock podcasts, particularly part 46, New Narratives. If you haven't checked out that Mindshock Maura Murray episode, check that one out. He seems to have gotten severely triggered over that certain car purchased in Amherst, which is quite strange because I explicitly stated that there's no reason to think that has anything to do with the disappearance of Maura Murray. So it's a little weird that he picked that to go bonkers over. But we'll be examining that, his recent court cases, and many other online activities of Bill Rausch and associated individuals. As always, if you like the podcast, you could donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. Make sure you allow your device to have those notifications come through. If you like the podcast, hit the like button. Feel free to share it across social media platforms. Any questions, comments, thoughts, theories, rebuttals, suggestions, leave them in the comment section. And I can't believe I actually have to say this, but if you're leaving a comment, it has to actually logically make sense. Otherwise, it's just a waste of time because no meaningful dialogue can take place if you're pretending that certain trolls and or narrative steerers or people just severely deficient in the English language, they pretend that there's some kind of difference of opinion because they don't understand the basic definitions of words. If you can't use a dictionary and empirically verify words you are using or words that have been used in this podcast, any kind of rebuttal or any attempt at conversation will be futile because if you're a poster who's not at least a very, very basic English level, denying the empirically verifiable definitions of words just to obfuscate or waste time, or if you're genuine, I mean, that's fine. Perhaps brush up on the English comprehension first before leaving a comment. This has nothing to do with difference of opinions. I'm not pushing any theory as true or untrue. Even in these episodes, I'm still maintaining Bill Rausch could be the good guy here. And I'm going to go into even further theories expanding upon that. So to pretend that I'm disagreeing just because someone's English comprehension is so deficit and their extreme Dunning-Kruger prevents them from understanding that, that's the kind of silliness that this case is just shrouded in online. Very, very bizarre. You could also check us out on Twitter, Reddit, Patreon, and Facebook. Patrons, of course, get priority for topic or true crime case requests and or podcasters. All right, so let's jump right in here. I'm going to address Bill Rausch's recent court issues first. So the update here, we're going to James Renner's blog. This was posted March 14th, 2020. The government comes out swinging in Rausch rape case. On Friday the 13th, prosecutors in D.C. filed 4 documents with the judge in Bill Rausch's ongoing sexual assault case. The first was a motion to exclude evidence of the victim's sexual history. Why? Because they monitored closely the absurd actions of Rausch's lawyer during the protection order hearing last year. Rausch's strategy in that case was to slut-shame his former girlfriend. His lawyer, a woman herself, asked the victim watch private sex videos she'd taped with Bill in what appeared to be an attempt to intimidate her into dropping the case. Didn't work. And in the end, the judge in that case found that Bill had likely committed the crime of stalking, ordering him to take 22 sessions of domestic violence counseling and pay the victim $1,813, money she spent on a new security system after he came to her apartment. They don't want that ridiculousness to continue in this case. The second motion asked the judge to allow them to use testimony from coworkers and friends of the victim. Immediately after the attempted rape, the victim told friends and coworkers about it. An investigation was conducted by Ray Group International. In fact, we now know that Bill lost his job because of this assault. They allowed him to resign before he could be fired. Third, a motion to limit testimony involving this reporter. The defense wishes to suggest that Bill wouldn't be in trouble at all if I hadn't reported on his crimes, and that somehow I influenced the 6 separate women who have come forward claiming everything from sexual harassment to abuse. The prosecutors point out that the victim went to police the day after the assault, years before she met me. The prosecutors suggest that if my interactions with the victims becomes a focus of the defense, it would open the door to the Maura Murray case, and prosecutors would be free to discuss Bill's involvement in that case. Finally, the prosecutors revealed their intention to bring up Bill's other crimes at trial, specifically the time he pushed the victim down the escalator on the metro. They state they have evidence that such a crime occurred and that it provides background that further explains his actions the night of the alleged sexual assault. To summarize, the state is anxious to take on Bill at trial. So this is right from James Renner's blog. Which, yeah, it's very, very bizarre. The James Renner haters that pretend he was lying about everything, he was lying about the grand jury, he was lying about all these things, where, again, history vindicates him at every turn because he's just reporting what was said to him. And you have these police reports. So I guess the new strategy and tactic of the James Renner haters are to paint the victim, or all these victims, I guess, they're all lying, they're all making it up. Which, maybe that's true, I don't know. But how would all these people online know? I mean, these are different women in different states. So all these online trolls and narrative steerers, they personally know each and every one of these women and they know that they're lying? I mean, if they do, they do, but I find that strange. Very, very bizarre. They're so blinded by their hatred for James Renner that they're willing to throw any and all victims under the bus just to propagate their own agenda against James Renner, just completely ignoring all of this other evidence in all these other cases. Now, I'm still saying, early on in the Bill Rausch episodes, this might all have nothing to do with Maura Murray, and he might have been the best boyfriend ever with Maura Murray, and her disappearance, or possibly another incident, might have driven him to become insane and or mentally disturbed, which could be the case for all of this. Or, I postulated this as well, if there was some kind of an entity that had it out for Bill Rausch, did they pay off all these women? And, I mean, I don't think James Renner would have known about it because he seems to be honestly reporting everything. But if there was another entity that was out to get Bill Rausch, would they orchestrate all this and would they do it in this manner? I don't know. There seems to be a lot of witnesses and all these other people at all of his workplaces that even if they weren't necessarily harassed or intimidated themselves, they witnessed it. So this is not just these 6 victims. These are all these other people that worked with these victims, plus people on military bases and all this that seem to affirm that this is a pattern of behavior on the part of Bill Rausch. I don't know if any of it's true. I'm not saying it is true. Again, these just so many online narrative steerers, trolls, or possibly just individuals that are so deficient in the basics of the English language, they think that I'm saying all of this is 100% true against Bill Rausch. No, I'm not. He might be the good guy, and all these allegations might be false, and all these people might be paid off, or there's something else we don't know about. Maybe he's got an evil twin. I don't know. I'm not purporting to know anything for sure. So it's kind of strange when people accuse me of propagating certain theories. I mean, I don't know what happened with any of these cases. So I'm not saying anything is true or untrue because I don't know. I can't believe how many times I have to repeat that because there's just so many deficient people out there. But let's move on to more recent information. And this would be April 9th, 2020, another post on James Renner's blog. Rausch lawyer, Bill would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for that meddling kid. So this is an excerpt here, anticipated evidence cross-examination. Given how central Renner has made himself to the instant prosecution, it is difficult to imagine conducting adequate cross-examination of the victim, and others who have similarly been whipped into a frenzy by Renner while skirting the truth that none of them would have been the least bit interested in prosecuting Mr. Rausch for his alleged involvement in this uncertain incident that took place 9 years ago if it were not for Renner's involvement. The lawyer representing Bill Rausch in his ongoing sexual assault cases in D.C. filed several motions this week. Among them was a response to the prosecutor's request for a hearing to determine how much, if anything, she's allowed to bring up about this journalist's reporting on the case. Rausch's lawyer claims that none of these victims would have come out against Bill if I hadn't planted the idea in their head to do so. Rausch's lawyer is a woman herself, so it's shocking to see that the defense's argument is that these women, I think we're up to 6 now, who reported everything from sexual harassment to rape didn't do so because of their personal strength and determination, but because a man told them to do so. It's not only insulting, it's untrue. Each of these women sought me out because I was reporting on Bill. The victim in this case tried to file charges in 2011, but since it was before the Me Too movement, her complaint fell on deaf ears. She's also forgetting that the judge for the protection order that his mistress filed after he beat her up and stalked her found the reports to be credible enough to compel Bill to take over 20 domestic violence classes. In that hearing, Bill's lawyer made the victim watch a private porno that Bill had recorded to see what her response would be. That's kind of disturbing. I mean, is that ethical to do that? I don't know. That's bizarre. Okay, Bill is upset that this journalist has become a part of the case, but Bill Rausch's own actions made that happen. He made me a victim too when he stalked me online using fake social media accounts to attack my credibility in preparation for his trial. He compelled others to do things like post maps to my house online, and he did so from a U.S. base in East Africa. At least 2 co-workers from that base have also filed harassment charges against him. And James Renner, of course, did share emails from that. Okay, it's a gross argument because it doesn't argue that the attempted rape did not happen, but that the woman would and should have remained silent about it. And judges in D.C. don't look kindly on victim blaming these days. That is really, really bizarre because if that really is their case, that none of these women would have come forward if Renner hadn't sought them out or whatever. That's really, really weird. I mean, shouldn't they be focusing on whether or not crimes took place instead of why victims came forward? That's really, really bizarre. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And here is the next day's post, April 10th, 2020. Further motions show defense strategy in Bill Rausch's sex assault case. Factual background. According to disclosures by the government, both pursuant to both Brady and Jenks, as well as discovery provided pursuant to Rule 16, counsel has learned that the complainant carried on at least one significant sexual relationship in the workplace and that she may have had a crush on Mr. Rausch as a result of his past work experience. This evidence is relevant to explain why the complainant willingly returned to the executive office suite with Mr. Rausch after he let her into the office on March 17th, 2011. 3 motions were filed by Bill Rausch's defense attorney on April 7th. It gives me insight on how she intends to defend Bill against the allegations of sex assault, and it's, well, a mess. First, Bill's lawyer intends to broadcast details of the victim's sexual history, a tactic she used at Bill's recent civil hearing that failed spectacularly in court. This is a cheap tactic that appears to be designed to intimidate the victim and has no bearing on the assault in question. Excerpt here, any motive to fabricate the claim arose on the night of the alleged incident, specifically when co-workers allegedly discovered the complainant sharing alcoholic beverages in an executive suite with Mr. Rausch after hours. The complainant had a motive to fabricate the assault lest her co-workers and bosses think less of her for being in such a compromising position. This motive was strengthened by the complainant's vocal criticism about Mr. Rausch's management style prior to allegedly being discovered alone with him in an executive suite sharing a beer after hours. She also, so back to the blog, she also floats the idea that the victim had a crush on Bill and that the reason she made up the assault was because she was caught with a beer in the office. That doesn't come close to explaining why Bill hid under the desk when the assault was interrupted, or why he lost his job over it. Nor does it explain the 5 other women who have come forward. Okay, back to the court excerpt. In an effort to prove that on March 17, 2011, Mr. Rausch sexually assaulted the complainant, the government seeks to introduce evidence that he was a misogynist, that he created a hostile work environment for women, and that on some undisclosed prior occasion he allegedly elbowed the complainant down on the escalators at a local metro station. The preferred evidence is not relevant, cannot be connected to Mr. Rausch, and is inadmissible other crimes evidence, the prejudice of which outweighs any probative value. Okay, so back to the blog. The lawyer also hopes to exclude evidence the government found concerning the time Bill pushed the victim down the steps on the metro escalator. He could have killed her. Luckily, all she ended up with was a bruise and a torn dress. Bill faces up to 20 years if convicted. You know what's weird though? There should be security footage from the metro, right? This is 2011 in DC. So there should be, if there's video evidence, I mean, even if there's not evidence of the exact push, if that's not clear because there's a lot of people or whatever, if Bill was present, if they have him on video exiting or whatnot in the area at the time, that would introduce the possibility that he could have done that, right? I haven't really heard too much about that. Okay, so let's review here. So according to James Renner, in his last appearance on the Missing Maura Murray podcast, he said that Bill Rausch talked to Tim and Lance last year, and he told them that Renner was lying and there was no grand jury. Renner said that Bill was lying because the target letter that is sent out to people investigated by grand juries was also served to his workplace. And then, of course, we know the grand jury happened at this point. Erin Larkin was a witness for Bill Rausch, but she was ultimately not called. All right, so that's interesting. So we have Bill Rausch denying the grand jury to Tim and Lance, and then of course Erin Larkin denied the grand jury to everyone online. And she said Renner was lying about everything, there were no victims, etc., etc. And that James Renner made it all up. And then I guess that got shifted to the victims are making it all up because Renner told them to or something like that. I don't really follow. Erin Larkin's logic outside of New Hampshire investigating is indeed bizarre. In the 107 Degrees podcast logical analysis that I went over on Mindshock, and this was where I went over claims made by Erin Larkin, Scott Wall, and their other podcaster, Ethan, which was just a point-by-point logical analysis of what they were saying. And because I titled her response here in all caps was, we all know that all truly logical, sane people use capital letters, fake voices, and fake identities to make logical and scientific examinations that they then post anonymously on the internet. Thank you for your service to logical analysis. You've truly enlightened me. I didn't even have to listen. So, of course, another ad hominem logical fallacy right there. And then also, I only have the title in capital letters, so I guess it's just the title. And what does capital letters have to do with truth anyway? I mean, the descriptions don't have any capital letters in them. It's just the title. So she's got some kind of strange phobia of capital letters to the point that she can't make any kind of rebuttal. Well, why is she typing in all capital letters for these responses? I mean, if this was going to be congruent, I guess she could type the title of her response in capital letters and then the rest of it normal. I don't know. But she didn't even listen, so she couldn't even be bothered to make any kind of rebuttals to any of the points made. Maybe that's because she doesn't have any. Very interesting. I also gave her credit for a lot of things, but I guess she wouldn't know since she didn't listen. And then they went back and forth, and the only other thing she offered was she was only willing to talk about her underwear or something with John Smith. I don't know. There was no there was no points of any kind of merit to discuss. She's not willing to discuss anything or to have any kind of logical debate of any kind. Just these ad hominem attacks, these phobias of capital letters. I mean, it's really, really bizarre. I don't think I've ever seen anybody else with such a phobia of capital letters. It's just really, really, really bizarre. But all I really did in that logical analysis was point out a lot of the misconceptions, the narrative steering, and then also give credit where credit was due to Aaron Larkin, and just pointed out that the logic off switch just seems to instantly trigger whenever UMass is brought up or any of those things. There were also other comments trying to say not to use logic on the podcast or logical fallacy. I'm going to give another definition of logic because I guess so many people don't understand what it is clearly. They just don't have a clue. Reasoning conducted or assessed according to strict principles of validity. So, of course, anybody who's interested in truth of any kind, you have to examine things to see if they're valid. See, baseless claims and logical fallacies, how valid are those? So if we're really after the truth, if we're really after justice or closure in the Maura Murray case and in other podcast series, other cases, other topics, if you're after the truth, then logic should be of the utmost concern, because to be able to discern whether something is valid or not, whether something is an assumption, whether or not certain narrative steers are pretending assumptions are facts and then trying to steer accordingly, that all needs to be exposed. And how do you do that? Well, you use logic. So it's kind of very telling that certain triggered personalities in the case and certain people, they don't want logic to be used. Very, very telling. So also in a previous podcast, I also talked about Bill Rausch purchasing the car at Amherst. Now, this is probably the least relevant to the Maura Murray disappearance. As far as I can tell, there's no reason to believe that has anything to do with anything. So what's also interesting is that Bill Rausch constantly says he's going to be talking to people. So supposedly he did do an interview, at least one, if not two, with Aaron Larkin, not released. But if that's true, and he did do those interviews, because he keeps saying he's going to talk about Maura at a future time, and so he's allegedly posted on Reddit or someone using his name. He's semi-active on Twitter. And he responded to my episode 46 new narratives on Twitter, saying that he would be willing to do an interview of some kind. And of course I said, you could just clear up any issues right there. I mean, it would take it would take 30 seconds for him to just clearly state whatever needs to be stated. But he is, of course, the master of non-answers. He, of course, military trained in psychological operations, so no stranger to obfuscation and narrative steering techniques. Again, it doesn't mean he's guilty. I'm not alleging that means he's guilty in any way. He could just be screwing around. I mean, some people theorize that Bill Rausch had nothing to do with Maura Murray. He's just disturbed in a particular way where he likes the attention in reference to that case. So that's why he always drops these comments hinting that he's going to disclose his feelings, thoughts, what Maura's state of mind was, and all these things. And he never actually does. He just, if anybody's been following him on social media the past year or two, he never actually really gave it. Because he could have gone on Missing Maura Murray. I mean, why? It's very, very strange. What's also strange is that Aaron Larkin immediately jumped in to defend him. So her comment was this: when one spends 100% of their time in two locales, West Point and Amherst, it makes sense that most of their purchases would be in those two places. And New York State plus local taxes, which is over 8%, whereas in 2004, Massachusetts tax was 5%. What reason would there be to lie about that anyway? Once again, who said I was alleging he was lying? It's just, these people get so triggered about everything, and then the straw man and pretending points were made that weren't made, and then, of course, Dunning-Kruger and psychological projection and all these ego issues get spun into the mix, and then all of a sudden nobody's interested in this truth or accuracy or logic, and then they're attacking anybody using logic, anybody attempting to find out what is valid, what is not valid in the interest of the real truth. So that's kind of bizarre that Aaron Larkin chose the tax reason. So a 3% difference in tax. So that's I mean, depending on the price of a car, you're looking at a couple $100 difference. Now, how much was the gas to get to drive it back and forth? I mean, you're looking at almost, there's really not much of a difference in price if you're looking at a 3% tax difference, unless he was so loaded that he's buying, Ferraris or Lambos, things that are just super expensive where the 3% difference could make a difference. Because if the vehicle was $1,000, that's $30. He's going to drive all the way to Amherst to save $30. If the vehicle is $10,000, that's $300. And so, very, very bizarre. And Bill just kept going on and on. He said he bought the car while living in New York before moving to Oklahoma. But he never specified the exact time, because if he was only going to be there for a month or two, do people buy a car that they're only going to need for a month or two? Like, what was he using before that? Did he have another car? Again, he never actually answers any of these real questions. So some people online who have followed all this, they find it pretty strange that Bill Rausch chose, out of all the things mentioned on the podcast, which of course includes the phone call activity and all these other things that Bill Rausch should probably legitimately be concerned about, he picks the most innocuous thing mentioned on the podcast, which was this car purchase in Amherst, in the Amherst area, Northampton. And that, again, Fred Murray referenced that Maura's boyfriend had luck there with the vehicle. So, and I explicitly stated on the podcast, there's absolutely no reason to believe that has anything to do with Maura Murray going missing. It's really, really bizarre. It's just so silly. But the narrative steerers and or trolls, of course, they pretend that I'm alleging that it has something to do. I explicitly stated, again, that's why you have to have a certain proficiency in the English language. I mean, at least the first grade level to really make effective rebuttals, but it wouldn't even be a rebuttal because I'm not stating that that's what happened. I'm not even stating that Bill Rausch is the bad guy. I'm explicitly stating he could have been the good guy trying to help Maura. Because if he knew something was up, that would explain all the phone activity because he was trying to help her. The only thing some people online could come up with is that if Rausch was involved in a plan to help Maura, perhaps he could have been, or at least planning to buy. Maybe he never even bought the car that he was going to buy, maybe to help Maura or for Maura or for whatever. Because again, some people are so illogical, they can't comprehend the possibility. For example, if the Saturn was being ditched, the plan might have not been to ditch it right in front of neighbors. Things go wrong in life. I don't know why that's hard for so many people to understand. But if there was some kind of a plan to ditch the Saturn, the plan went wrong. It either broke down, there was some kind of an issue where the Saturn had to be abandoned, where they didn't plan to abandon it at that spot. But how does that eliminate the possibility that the Saturn was either being towed or taken somewhere to be gotten rid of? It's really bizarre, the lack of critical thinking by many of these steerers, or just a lot of these people that just take on blind faith as gospel truth, the mainstream or official narratives, without actually examining those narratives for validity. The one thing Bill Rausch did do is he did post a photograph of him with a Saab. It's unclear the date of the purchase, but you can see the Saab dealership sign in the background. And he does look quite young, so maybe this is that particular purchase. Again, I never said it had anything to do with Maura Murray's disappearance, but here's his post. In the spirit of my own Saab story, here's a photo of me with mine from years ago. Bruce, feel free to do an entire episode on the car next time. All right, so what are the options here? Let's go over the different theories. Did Bill Rausch choose the car purchase to obfuscate and divert attention from the real issues in the case, just to, again, waste time, divert, and anything and everything that wouldn't be conducive to solving the case? Is that why he's putting so much focus on something that's seemingly irrelevant? Because if it were relevant, like the phone calls or all these other things, would he be spending so much time discussing it and posting photos and all of these things, because he's not commenting on the phone calls. He's not commenting on how he got emergency leave. You know, he's having other people speak for him on podcasts. Of course, on the Missing Maura Murray podcast, when he had that Sam or Bob guy say that he must have had to really pull some strings. I heard he was there within hours, not days. So, and of course, Bill Rausch was calling and texting Kate Markopoulos. We don't have copies of any of the texts or any of those things. We really don't know what was going on, what she told him, but there was interest in UMass. Of course, you know, he doesn't come out and talk about how his parents made the trip for a DUI walkaway, how his mentor in West Point just left his job along with his wife and just drove to New Hampshire in the middle of winter. And it's bizarre. Everybody dropped what they were doing for a DUI walkaway when Fred Murray himself is telling Julie not to get Julie, the sister of Maura Murray, not Fred Murray, the father of Maura Murray, telling her not to get emergency leave because they don't know exactly what's going on. Because if it's just a DUI walkaway and she's just holed up in a hotel somewhere and she's going to come back to the car or just resurface, there's no reason to go crazy with emergency leave and all these things without knowing the situation. And yet on Bill Rausch's side with his parents and the McDonald's, those are all unanswered questions. So is Bill Rausch focusing on the car purchase because it really has nothing to do with anything? Is that why he wanted to spend time on it, to divert and obfuscate? I don't know. I really don't know. If it does have something to do with Maura Murray, why would he? I don't think he'd be volunteering any information about it or posting photos or any of these things. I don't know, though. I really don't know. As other people have speculated, they think that Bill Rausch just enjoys the attention, and he really did have nothing to do with Maura Murray's disappearance. And like I postulate, Bill Rausch could be the good guy here. Regardless of personality, behavioral issues, crimes, and assaults he may have committed after Maura Murray went missing, or whatever person he is today, that doesn't mean that's who he was in 2004. He might have been the good guy in 2004. He might have been trying to help Maura Murray. He might have even hatched that plan with Fred Murray, and that's why Fred Murray calls him the salt of the earth. If Maura Murray's Saturn was responsible for the Patrice Vasily hit and run, and this was all some plan to get Maura Murray out of there, or just to ditch the Saturn, and this has nothing to do with the CI situation. Maybe Maura Murray was never a CI. Maybe this has nothing to do with that. We really don't know. Let's not fall for black and white fallacies. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe there's a combination of scenarios that could have all been at play simultaneously. I mean, this does seem to be an unusual case. That's for sure. Otherwise, it would have already been solved. So just always unanswered questions in the Maura Murray case, and many, many unanswered questions, and just a lot of very, very bizarre things. I will touch upon one more mind shock, which I don't believe I've discussed. This was actually posted on James Renner's blog once again. Wednesday, November 11th, 2015, readers notice Bill called Visa Fraud Center the day after Maura disappeared. About 3 hours after Bill Rausch presumably learned that Maura was missing, and immediately after he spoke to someone at the Haverhill Police Department, he dialed the Visa Fraud Center number. Very interesting. What did he suspect? What did he know? Because he makes a beeline for UMass, and then he goes to UMass again after the week search for Maura and going over all these states with Bob McDonald before Bob McDonald gets a car to go back home to West Point, because I think his wife left earlier on their car or whatnot. And so there seems to be a lot of interest in UMass by Bill Rausch. So he's calling the Visa Fraud Center. Is that just an innocent call to see if anybody stole her card and it was flagged? I don't know. Again, a lot of unanswered questions. The last thing we're going to go over here is a statement from Bill Rausch, which is quite curious. This was brought up by astute researchers on the Maura Murray Mindshock subreddit. And this was from the ID Vanished episode, in one of his few on-camera appearances.
She didn't just wander into the woods to try to commit suicide. She has everything to live for. She was going to graduate in June into a nursing career. She was about to get engaged.
Maura's boyfriend, Army First Lieutenant Bill Rausch, says he got an email from Maura the morning before she disappeared, saying that she loved him.
It was in response to a voicemail I'd left her, that I'd, missed her and loved her and was anxious to talk to her again. And her email was basically in a reply to that, basically saying that she loved me and that she wanted to talk, but we'd talk later. I can discard reports on her being suicidal or depressed because I discussed things with her on a daily basis. I mean, things were great. Things were really great. There's so many uncertainties that we just really can't grasp hold of. And when I tell a story about my girlfriend, I mean, am I telling the story about my ex-girlfriend? Am I telling the story about my former girlfriend, my current girlfriend? It is difficult, but the fact still remains that right now she's not here, and it doesn't seem likely that she will ever be here. So.
Some micro expressions there, a couple of little smiles. Again, doesn't really mean anything because we don't know what he's referring to. But that's an interesting statement. It doesn't seem likely that she will ever be here. What makes him say that? I guess if he lost all hope or whatnot. So this is roughly 2 years after Maura's missing. So we're not talking 10 or 20 years. This is 2 years. There's so many uncertainties that we just can't grasp hold of. What does he mean by that? Is that a typical thing for the ex-boyfriend to say? There's so many uncertainties that we just can't grasp hold of. Or is he referring to the possibility that Maura Murray might not have been at the accident scene and that she never left UMass because he did have interest at UMass? Once again, I don't know. These are just many, many questions that need to be asked because, once again, the truth is not afraid of investigation. It doesn't seem likely that she will ever be here. Some little smirks in there, too, almost reminiscent of Burke Ramsey's interview with Dr. Phil. Now, once again, Burke Ramsey might be autistic. He might have some kind of psychological conditions. And he was also 7 when John Bonet was killed. So, yeah, completely different situation. But still, for the people who study microexpressions, just all the data there, it is a little strange. And then, of course, if this is 2 years afterwards, again, did the disappearance make him go a little crazy or whatnot? So, whereas if this was the day of, again, different situations. I'm not saying there's anything definitive to be gleaned from any of this, but just examining it, it doesn't seem likely that she will ever be here. So that's what he's saying 2 years afterwards, because apparently he never went back after that initial search, and he was not really in the immediate search area because he was driving all over Maine, Vermont, all these other places, and then, of course, to UMass. So, yeah, he didn't go back to search on any of the subsequent searches. Another interesting thing that, again, many online researchers, very astute, mentioned this because, of course, Bill Rausch got emergency leave very, very quickly for a non-family emergency. Okay, Bill's parents, when did they arrive in Haverhill? So if we go to this the Whitman Hanson Express article, Maura is Missing by Marybeth Conway and Josh Cutler, which was published July 12, 2007, Bill Rausch had arrived in Woodsville earlier Wednesday and met up with his parents, Bill and Sharon, who traveled from their home in Marengo, Ohio. Around 5 p.m. Wednesday, the Rausch family arrived at the Haverhill Police Department, located on Route 10, about 9 miles from the scene of Maura's accident. Billy was extensively interrogated in private, and then Bill and I were questioned in the room with Billy. And so Bill is Bill Sr., Billy is Bill Jr. Okay. Sharon Rausch later recounted, Before walking through airport security, Billy shut off his cell phone shortly after a mysterious call came in that would later be a source of dispute. And then, of course, this is the whimpering Red Cross phone call that we know did not come from Red Cross. We don't know where it came from, but Red Cross is the only thing that can be ruled out, which I've gone over, again, on the ping pong episode extensively, and Lieutenant Landry's involvement, where he tells the Rausches that it was a Red Cross call. The Rausches don't believe it. So that would be interesting. And how would Landry know at that time about the call? Because he didn't even know about the call at that moment. But anyway, okay. So what people bring up is, why did Bill's parents make a 12-hour trip at night in the middle of winter to meet Bill? Because they would have had to have been at the police station by 5 p.m. So they would have had to leave Ohio at around 4 a.m. When did he tell them to leave, though? Did they leave earlier? Because this is just an abandoned car. It could be a DUI walkaway. And Bill's getting his parents and the McDonald's to just drive out there at the drop of a hat on a dime. Whereas Fred Murray himself is telling Julie Murray not to get emergency leave because they don't know the situation. So other people postulate this, that what if there was some kind of get-together plan, maybe a Valentine's Day week or something of that nature, where Bill Rausch's parents, maybe even the McDonald's, they were already planning to go to a certain area in New Hampshire with Billy, and Billy already had leave. So he didn't have to get emergency leave because he already arranged it earlier. And then, of course, something went wrong, regardless of whether Billy's the good guy or the bad guy, regardless of which one of those situations is true. Because looking at it backwards, again, all of these very astute online researchers bring up, what are these people thinking? Because if Bill Rausch's parents, who aren't super young, and if they're working, they have to go that early, like in the middle of the drive or once they get there, what if Maura just shows up? Because if it's a DUI walkaway, I mean, why'd they make that drive? And they got to just drive home? Isn't it common? I mean, it's an abandoned vehicle. They really don't know if she was even with the vehicle, right? Because what if she was at the dorm, her phone died, they don't really know. We're talking about a number of hours here. We really don't know. Because how do they know she's not going to return to the dorm room? What if she went to some other party or was, maybe she's got a new boyfriend? Maybe, you're talking about a 21-year-old here in college. You're talking about all these unknown variables. Is Fred Murray the only one thinking logically, where he's telling Julie Murray not to get emergency leave right away because they're not sure what the situation is? Whereas all these other people are just, at the drop of a hat, they're just driving out to New Hampshire. As soon as they get there, what if Maura's back? Like, what would they be thinking? Is that unusual? How many other missing persons cases does this happen in on this timeline? I don't know. And then the other thing that's pointed out is that Sharon Rausch immediately starts taking notes, and then Mrs. McDonald starts interviewing neighbors. Is this all common for a DUI walkaway? Does this happen in other cases? Why would there be a need for note? Like, it's just kind of weird. Some people speculate that notes would be necessary if a narrative was to be formed and needed to be stuck to. Because if you're telling the truth, then you don't really need to remember anything, right? Because you're just telling the truth. But if you're spinning narratives that might not be the truth, it becomes that much more important to stay consistent with a narrative, right? If a narrative was being developed. Again, I don't know. This is just one strange case. Everything about it is just really, really bizarre. The other thing that's kind of weird, of course, Bill Rausch is on the phone, and I don't think I brought this up yet. Is it possible that Bill Rausch was already traveling while making some of the phone calls? I don't know. Yeah, it's bizarre. But the other thing is, where was Bob McDonald? Because he's talking to McDonald, or the McDonald's landline, for the 34-minute call Monday evening around 7:30 during the alleged accident. What's going on at that time? What does Billy Rausch know? What does Bob McDonald know? Why did Bob McDonald make it a point to say that they weren't talking about Maura? And how is that believable? Because if Bill Rausch is engaged to be engaged, and Bob McDonald is his mentor, and Bob McDonald also knows Maura Murray, what are the chances that they wouldn't mention his engaged to be engaged fiance upcoming Valentine's Day? And why would he feel the need to go out of his way to say that Maura wasn't mentioned? It's all very, very bizarre. A funny comment on the Reddit was this: think about your parents driving 12 hours over an abandoned car after they were getting up at 4 a.m. allegedly to get to New Hampshire by 5 p.m. Then when they arrive, you say, oh, hey, she's okay. She was skiing and left the car to tow. No worries. You can drive back now. Thanks. If that had been the situation, in hindsight, it does look even more curious, because were Bill Rausch and his parents and the McDonalds operating with information that other people don't have and that we don't have today? Many, many more things to ponder regarding Bill Rausch and the entire Maura Murray case. Was he the good guy? Was he the bad guy? Did he go crazy after the disappearance and become disturbed? Are there other aspects of his life we don't know about that cause him to behave this way? And it has absolutely nothing to do with the Maura Murray disappearance, and he had nothing to do with Maura Murray's disappearance. Just, as always, many more unanswered questions than answers. Hope you enjoyed another edition of Mindshock True Crime in the Maura Murray series. If you like the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. If you like the podcast, hit that like button. Share it across social media platforms. Any questions, comments, thoughts, theories, rebuttals, debunkings, leave them in the comments section. You could also check us out on Twitter, Reddit, Patreon, and Facebook. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.